All right, let's jump into today's deep dive. We're going to be talking about energy markets, specifically oil and natural gas. You sent over some really interesting stuff for this one, including this analysis from Next Level Traders.
Yeah, they had some good points.
We're going to sift through all of that and hopefully pull out some useful insights for you.
Sounds good.
So what's kind of surprising right now is the oil market is holding up pretty well. Despite some volatility, prices are above $73 a barrel.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising, right?
Okay,
Especially given all the uncertainty that's out there.
exactly. So what do you think is driving that strength?
Well, it seems like the crude market is tightening. We can see that in the backwardation across the Brent crude, WTI, and Dubai curves. So the market is definitely under some pressure right now. And then, of course, you've got Saudi Arabia. They just increased their price for February.
Right, which seems to confirm that tightening, huh?
Exactly.
And so does that mean we should be bracing ourselves for an
Yeah.
oil price surge?
Well, it's definitely possible. Things are tight. We're seeing declining U.S. crude inventories. And the global trends are all pointing upward. But I wouldn't say it's a guaranteed rocket launch just yet.
Okay. Okay, so what's preventing that? What's the thing that's stopping oil prices from going through the roof?
Oh, OPEC Plus is the key player here. They've got a significant amount of spare capacity.
How much you're talking?
Something like 4 to 5 million barrels per day, which they can bring online pretty quickly if needed to help stabilize prices.
So they're basically acting as a market stabilizer.
Exactly. They're the balancing force right now. Experts are predicting an average Brent crude price of around $75 a barrel for the year.
Okay.
But they're also saying that we could see swings between the high $50 and close to $90.
Wow. A potential $30 swing. That's a pretty big range.
Yeah. It really just highlights how unpredictable this market can be.
Absolutely. Speaking of unpredictable, one thing that caught my eye in the material you sent was the dip in China's oil demand. I did not see that coming.
Yeah. It was a pretty significant shift. Their delivered oil product demand actually decreased by about 400,000 barrels per day.
Wow.
And to put that into perspective, they typically see growth of around 500,000 barrels per day. So this reversal is about a 40% impact on global oil demand growth.
So that's a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think this is a sign of a larger economic slowdown in China?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's something that traders are definitely watching very closely.
Of course. So China might be pumping the brakes a little bit.
But it sounds like the U.S. is hitting the gas. When it comes to shale oil production, those projections of 300,000 to 400,000 barrels per day, that's got to be shaking things up a bit.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely adds another layer of complexity. If U.S. shale production grows faster than expected, it could make it more difficult for OPEC Plus to manage the market.
That's interesting because we often hear about the U.S. becoming less reliant on foreign oil, so I just assumed increased U.S. production would be a good thing across the board. It definitely has its advantages. Remember, the U.S. is now the world's largest oil producer and exporter. But there's a catch. If oil prices drop too low, U.S. production could actually take a hit.
So it's a delicate balancing act.
Exactly.
It seems like these days it's not just about supply and demand, though, right? This whole global trend towards resource control is adding a whole other dimension to the equation.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing countries around the world really trying to gain leverage and control over key resources, and it's playing out in a lot of different ways.
So can you give me some examples?
Well, the most obvious one is the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where energy has essentially become a weapon. But then you also have China's ambitions towards Taiwan, and even Greenland is starting to enter the conversation with its potential oil and natural gas reserves.
Greenland. Wow. I've never even thought about them as a player in the energy game.
Yeah, they have massive untapped reserves, which is making them increasingly attractive to a lot of countries looking to secure their energy future.
Wow. This whole global resource grab is kind of unnerving, to be honest. It feels like it could lead to even more conflict and instability down the road.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. And it's not just about energy resources either. We're seeing similar trends with other essential resources, like food and metals.
Right. So which geopolitical hotspots should we be keeping a particularly close eye on?
Well, there are several key areas, I think. First, global manufacturing activity. If we see an acceleration, that could push oil prices higher, but a slowdown could have the opposite effect. Second, the situation between China and Taiwan. That's a major wild card. Any escalation there could cause huge disruptions, potentially even a global recession. And finally, China's resource stockpiling is something to watch. It could be an indicator of how they're preparing for potential future conflicts, which could definitely impact oil prices.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got a lot to keep an eye on.
We
On a slightly different note, there's been a lot of talk about President Biden's bill to protect U.S. ocean areas from offshore drilling. I was curious about the impact of that. Doesn't the U.S. get a pretty significant chunk of its oil from offshore drilling?
It does, but this bill is more about limiting future expansion. It won't have a huge impact on current production,
Right.
which is around 13.5 million barrels per day, with only about 2 to 2.5 million coming from offshore.
Okay, so
Yeah,
more of a long-term play than an immediate game changer.
exactly.
Got it. Speaking of shifting landscapes, what's happening with natural gas? Any major developments on that front?
Well, Ukraine recently made the decision to stop Russian natural gas transit.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a big deal. What's been the fallout from that?
It's actually been pretty minimal.
Really? Why is that?
Well, since losing access to Russian gas after the invasion, Europe has adapted remarkably well. They've shifted towards flexible LNG imports, which allows them to adjust their supplies much more easily.
So they've basically reduced their reliance on Russia and gained more leverage in the process. That's pretty impressive.
It is. They've shown incredible resilience in the face of a really significant energy challenge.
It seems like the energy market is a constantly moving target, with so many forces at play.
Yeah, it's incredibly dynamic, with demand fluctuations, geopolitical tensions, and production capacities all kind of intertwined in a very complex way. And that complexity is only going to intensify in the years ahead.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm following you. We've got a surprisingly strong but volatile oil market, with OPEC Plus trying to maintain some stability while facing challenges from growing U.S. shale production and China's unpredictable demand.
That's a great summary.
And then on top of all of that, we have this global scramble for resource control, which is adding even more uncertainty to the mix.
Exactly.
Wow, a lot to digest.
It is, but it's also a fascinating time to be following the energy markets because the decisions made today will have ripple effects for years to come.
All right, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a moment to unpack some of these trends and explore what they could mean for the global economy, the environment, and, perhaps most importantly, you, the listener. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Glad we're getting a chance to really dig into these energy market trends.
Yeah, me too. The more we explore this, the more I realize how much is going on beneath the surface. It's like we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. We see the oil prices, the headlines about all the geopolitical tensions, but there's this massive unseen force underneath that's kind of driving everything.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And it's true. There are all these interconnected economic trends, technological advancements, political decisions that are all influencing the energy market in ways that we're only just beginning to understand.
So how do we even begin to make sense of it all, this constantly shifting energy landscape?
Well, focusing on the fundamentals is key. Having a good grasp of the basic principles of supply and demand, paying attention to global economic trends, and keeping a close eye on those geopolitical developments.
Okay, that makes sense. But it still feels like a lot to keep track of.
It is. That's why staying informed is so critical. Reading industry publications, following expert analysis, and even just having discussions like this one. The more you learn, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions. That could impact your investments, or even just your daily life.
All right, so let's unpack this a bit further. You mentioned supply and demand. How are those forces shaping the energy market right now?
Well, on the supply side, you've got a few key dynamics at play. The growth of U.S. shale production is adding more oil to the global market. But then you have OPEC Plus trying to manage supply to keep prices stable. And then, of course, there are those geopolitical factors like the war in Ukraine, which has disrupted those global energy flows we were talking about.
So it's kind of a tug of war between all these different forces, each vying for influence.
Exactly. And then on the demand side, you have a global economy that's still recovering from the pandemic, China's demand, which remains a bit of a wild card, and the growing push for renewable energy, which is starting to impact the demand for those fossil fuels.
Right, so a lot of uncertainty on both sides of the equation.
There is.
Yeah.
And that uncertainty is feeding a lot of the volatility we're seeing in the market.
That makes sense. We've talked about supply and demand, geopolitics, but what about the role of technology? How is that impacting the energy market?
Technology is a major disruptor. On one hand, advancements in drilling and extraction techniques are making it possible to produce more oil and gas from unconventional sources, like shale, which is contributing to that surge in U.S. production we talked about.
Right, but then on the other hand, you have this rapid development of renewable energy technologies,
Hmm.
like solar and wind power, which is starting to shift the balance of power in the energy market.
Precisely. We're in the midst of a major energy transition, and it's not entirely clear how it's all going to play out. But one thing is for sure. But one thing is for sure. The energy landscape of the future will look very different.
So we're standing at a crossroads. What does this mean for the global economy?
Well, the energy market is a powerful engine. That drives the global economy. Any volatility or major shift like the one we're discussing is going to have ripple effects throughout the world. We're already seeing that with rising energy prices, contributing to inflation in a lot of countries. And if those prices continue to climb, it could stifle economic growth.
And what about the environmental impact of all of this energy transition?
Well, the shift to renewable energy is undeniably positive for the environment in the long run. However, there are challenges in the short term. The production of solar panels and wind turbines, for instance, requires a significant amount of energy and resources. And the disposal of these technologies can also present problems.
So it's not just a simple switch from dirty energy to clean energy.
It's not. It's about weighing the long-term benefits against the short-term costs and finding a sustainable path forward.
Okay, so we've covered the macro trends. Let's bring it back to a personal level. How can individuals like our listener navigate this complex energy landscape?
Well, staying informed, as we discussed, is crucial. Reading about the latest developments, following expert analysis, even just having conversations like this can empower you to make more informed decisions, whether it's choosing where to invest your money or even just considering your next vehicle purchase.
So you're saying we all need to become energy experts?
Not necessarily an expert in the academic sense, but having a fundamental understanding of how the energy market functions and how it affects your life is crucial, because whether you realize it or not, the energy market touches every aspect of our lives.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture. But what about personal finances? How can people protect themselves from rising energy prices and all the volatility in this market?
Well, there are several steps you can take. First, you can focus on reducing your energy consumption. That might involve making your home more energy efficient or finding alternative modes of transportation. Second, you might consider exploring investment opportunities in the renewable energy sector. There are a growing number of options available these days. And finally, diversifying your investment portfolio is always a wise move. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make sure you have a mix of investments. That can weather those inevitable storms in the energy market.
All right, that sounds like a solid plan. But I have to admit, it can feel a little overwhelming to try to grasp all of this.
I understand. It's a lot to process. But remember, you don't have to figure everything out overnight. Take it one step at a time, learn a little bit each day, and before you know it, you'll be navigating the energy market like a pro.
I like the sound of that. So where's a good place to start? What's the most important thing for people to understand about the energy market right now?
The key takeaway is that we're in a period of significant flux. The energy market is undergoing a major transformation. And this transition is going to present both challenges and opportunities. So it's essential to stay informed, adapt to the changing dynamics, and be prepared for the unexpected.
That's good advice for just about everything in life, isn't it?
It really is. Flexibility and adaptability are key.
Well, I know I need a moment to let all of this sink in when we come back. Can we shift gears and talk more about the specific implications of this energy transition? I'm really curious about what it means for the future of our planet and what role we can all play in shaping that future.
Absolutely. That's a great topic for discussion. We'll delve into all of that and more when we return for the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, I think I've had a moment to kind of process all that. It's a lot to think about, but
Yeah.
I'm ready to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk more about this
Right.
energy transition
Yeah.
and what it means for the future. You know, this whole shift away from fossil fuels. It's a pretty big deal, right?
Oh, it's a monumental shift. It really is. It's
Yeah.
going to have profound implications for the planet, our economies, really our entire way of life.
But where do we even begin to unpack all of this? What are some of the biggest challenges we're facing with this transition?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is simply the sheer scale of change required. We need to transition away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy sources. And we need to do it quickly, but that's a monumental task.
I can imagine. I mean, fossil fuels have been like the backbone of our energy system for centuries. It's not like we can just flip a switch.
Exactly. It requires a massive investment in new infrastructure. Think about new power grids. energy storage systems, transportation systems that are specifically designed for renewable energy.
And that's going to be expensive, right?
Yeah, it's a significant investment, there's no doubt about it, but we have to remember that the cost of inaction is far greater. The longer we wait to transition to clean energy, the more severe the consequences of climate change will become. And those consequences will have a devastating economic cost as well.
Right, so it's a classic case of pay now or pay later.
Mm.
But hopefully we're smart enough to choose the less painful option.
I hope so, too. But it's going to require collective effort from governments, businesses, and individuals around the world.
What can we do as individuals to support this transition? What actions can we take that will actually make a difference?
Well, there are many things you can do right now. You can start by making changes in your own life. Reduce your energy consumption. Be mindful of your energy usage at home and on the road. Support policies that promote renewable energy. Invest in companies that are actively working to build a more sustainable future. Every decision, no matter how small, can contribute to a larger shift.
It really does sound like we all had a role to play in this. When you look ahead, 10, 20, even 30 years, what do you think the energy landscape will look like?
Well, it's hard to predict the future with certainty, but I believe we'll see a much more diverse energy mix. Renewable sources like solar and wind will definitely play a much larger role. But I think fossil fuels will likely still be part of the equation for the foreseeable future. We'll also see more innovation in energy storage technologies, as well as smart grid technologies that allow us to manage energy more efficiently.
So it's not a sudden switch from fossil fuels to renewables, but more of a gradual evolution.
Exactly. And that evolution is already well underway.
Well, it's both exciting and a bit daunting to think about. This whole conversation has been incredibly eye-opening. I'm starting to understand just how complex this whole energy market really is and how it impacts our lives in so many ways.
That's what we were hoping for. The energy market is a fascinating, complex, and ever-evolving system. But by staying informed and engaged, we can all contribute to shaping a more sustainable energy future.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey to the world of energy.
It's been my pleasure.
And to you, our listener, thank you for providing such thought-provoking material for us to explore. We encourage you to continue diving deeper into these topics on your own. Until next time, stay curious.
And stay informed.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.